just making sure you know that. And then I think we were recently apprised that the organizers of the Middle of Millen Drive parade is also not going to happen this year. And I think that was mostly COVID related as well. So just some updates there on July 4th activities. The other thing that the council directed staff to do is to figure out how we can be supportive of the community and people that, whether it's organizations or nonprofits that have bought fireworks to sell them as fundraisers, etc., how we may be able to help financially with that, and or make sure we give our community good ideas as to how they can celebrate the 4th of July safely this year. And so our staff are going to be putting that together quickly so that we're not just saying what you can't do, but we're also talking about what we can do proactively. And perhaps one of the ideas I had was that by the time it's Tigard's birthday again, which is September 11th each year, that hopefully we maybe we could have a big fireworks celebration then if the weather improves and the conditions, fire conditions improve. Also an important update and reminder that the Tigard Aid program for assistance with utility payments is still available. We know that the impacts of COVID are continuing to be felt even now. We're committed to continuing to help the community and both individuals in the community or families and the business community. The Tigard Aid program is available to provide financial assistance for city fees and charges during the COVID-19 pandemic. And our goal is to ensure that every member of our community continues to have the basic services that they need. We've made it really easy to apply for Tigard Aid, and we can provide a link to a short form that you can use to fill out. So I'll ask our staff to put that link into the chat for this Facebook Live now. And I'm now going to take some community questions that were sent in a couple of days coming up to this Poolside chat. So the first one is, I don't know who this is from, but we have several concerns with the proposed development of 64 new homes by Venture Properties on the 11-acre property located at 12200 Southwest Bull Mountain Road. AKS Engineering and Kelly Ritz, president of Stonebridge Homes Northwest, hosted a Zoom neighborhood meeting on June 1, outlining their plans for an old tree farm. The neighbors in attendance raised concerns about the potential increase in traffic on Bull Mountain Road, lack of children's park in the plan, construction, access, and traffic on 120th, demolition of old growth trees, excessive rainwater runoff during the development phase, and very small lot sizes compared to other nearby developments with 10,000 square foot lots. Over 429 neighbors have signed a petition requesting the City of Tigard and the developer builder update their plans to alleviate our concerns. And I'm going to ask the staff here to scroll back up to the top because I'm literally going to take each of those things individually and talk through them. So the first thing that I will say is that we do not have an application yet. Once we do, our staff will be reviewing it for completeness and evaluating it. I also will, I want to make sure that folks know that land use laws and requirements that are in place, and this is really an Oregon land use law, whatever the criteria for development are when the applicant submits an application is what they get judged against. And so there are lots of things that people perhaps dislike about Oregon land use law. There's other parts of Oregon law that require that the city provide a certain amount of density of housing and a certain amount of housing stock for construction and for residential development. And that oftentimes requires that newer developments be more dense than you might desire. And that is all in Oregon law and not really an optional experience for the city. It is required. Let's see, there was concern about construction access and traffic on 120th. Those certainly are required to be mitigated during the planning process and as the project progresses. Sometimes there are things that aren't anticipated. I live near a site of a construction project that's probably relatively similar to this, maybe slightly smaller in size, and they started construction a couple months ago, and there were a lot of issues right from the get-go, and neighbors, including I, were communicating with the city staff about what wasn't working about the traffic and the construction access, and they had to address that to make it safe. So I'm confident that will happen. Certainly community members should communicate as if they feel like a construction process is not working. Oh, I need that back up. Can you scroll back up? Yep. Let's see. Demolition of old growth trees. The city of Tigard has a requirement around tree canopy, and that doesn't necessarily mean that every old growth tree is going to be preserved through development, but the code does request or does offer credit, and not just credit, but it encourages the preservation of old growth trees and just trees that are already present. So there is a requirement for that, but ultimately the tree canopy plan does involve potentially new trees. In fact, it almost always requires new trees and the evaluation of what a tree canopy will look like after a few years with planting new trees. Excessive rainwater runoff during development. That's also something that's required to be mitigated during the development phase. Again, if that's not happening, that can be communicated, but they are required to have plans around that. I already addressed lot sizes. The other comment was about the number of neighbors that have signed the petition. And I guess I'll just point out that I pay attention to the details. And while it's true that 429 people had signed the petition, the vast majority of them I would not consider neighbors, mostly because most of them don't live in Tigard even. And I don't say that to discredit their beliefs or their perspective, but I want to make sure that folks in Tigard know the facts. And the reality is many of the people that signed the petition thus far were not Tigard residents. Let's see. We will move on to our next question. Hopefully that covered that.
There's a follow-up on this question.
Okay. Becky, I'm assuming before new development occurs and is approved that water rights need to be procured, correct? So Becky, if this is property that's in the city of Tigard, the availability of water from our water utility is what would provide the water to those properties. It would not be with a well or something off of a river, which is what I'm kind of reading into the water rights question. We do operate a water utility and do provide water to all residents of Tigard that want to need it, and new development I don't think has an option to use wells or some other alternative. So that was the follow-up on that?
Yeah,
okay.
There's another follow-up. Didn't those same folks in Bull Mountain not want to be part of Tigard?
Didn't those same folks? I'm not sure what folks are being referenced there. Maybe you can put that into the chat, and I'll once you share with me what folks we're talking about, I'd be happy to try to answer that.
I think what they're referring to is the people who signed the petition.
It is very possible that some of the people that didn't sign it were residents of unincorporated Bull Mountain. I would at least consider them neighbors in some way, shape, or form, but many of the individuals that I saw that signed it were from Beaverton, Portland, and all over the place, which I have a little bit more trouble kind of calling neighbors, so that's why I made that clarification. So Connie says, Mr. Mayor, I missed your opening comments on the fireworks. Can you provide a summary of what council decided? I absolutely can. Just at a high level, the council decided to ratify the emergency that I declared, and also added some specific actions, which included banning all fireworks in the city of Tigard through July 9th. And then also dramatically increasing the fine and clarifying that it's a per item fine for use of illegal fireworks, so fireworks that are already illegal in Oregon. The fine for that will be increased to $1,000 per item, so pretty significant there. So hopefully that clarifies that. And then the other action I guess I don't know that I could call it council action. The other direction we provided to staff was to try to figure out how we could help nonprofits and other local small businesses that have procured fireworks that they were planning to sell inside the city of Tigard, perhaps to use them in the future when it's safe to do so, etc., but to sort of alleviate the financial burden for them as best we can. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's see, we've got something from Jim. Took a walk through the old Fields property today. There's a number of large camps in the wooded area. What's the city's policy on camping on this property? So there's not a separate policy on camping on that particular property, but we do enforce the codes, and we can make sure, I can make sure the staff that are here tonight get that information to our code enforcement and we have a community services officer in the police department who are actively working with the homeless individuals to get them connected to resources and make sure that they're not causing damage to our sensitive lands and other problems that may come up. So staff will get that to community services officer and to our code enforcement officer. All right. DM Lemley, is there a plan as how to spread word of the fireworks ban signage on 99W I-5-217? We asked the staff to come up with a robust communication plan. They can certainly take that information into consideration. I think with the speed at which it's got to be communicated, I happen to know from my last mayoral campaign that trying to get a billboard takes more than 3 or 4 days, so I'm pretty confident that's probably not going to happen, but your point is well taken about what we can do. I'm certain it will end up on our city reader board for sure. In fact, maybe that'll happen even during this chat, because I think the person that controls that's sitting here. Let's see, Becky asks, why is July 9th the key date throughout the state? I'm going to give you my straight answer. I think 2 of the 3 members of the council tonight, including myself, preferred something that went through August. I think July 9th is just almost something picked out of the air, to be honest, just to be totally transparent about that. I know that's what Tualatin worked from. I think they just picked a date that they thought was the end of the week after July 4th. I think the risk will continue throughout August and the end of July. So I felt like that was pretty arbitrary and not my preference, but I will also share the political reality was that if you watch the council meeting, we needed all 3 councilors that were present to agree to even vote on something and then to pass it. So we barely got there with that date, just to be totally honest. And if you have more questions about why I'm saying that, you can, again, go watch the council meeting and see why. Okay, Lorraine, can fireworks still be sold? My church has the tent in the Fred Meyer parking lot. There was discussion about that tonight, and the city attorney did not indicate we could ban them, and that was not part of the motion. So technically they can still be sold, but I think our hope is that we can, as a city, figure out how to help, for example, your church, if they've purchased them as a fundraiser, trying to figure out how to not let that be a financial burden for you. And perhaps we can use them in the future, again, for maybe the city's next birthday celebration. All right, Malia, I'm genuinely wondering if we're trying to prevent house fires in general, or is there an actual threat from suburban fireworks to start forest fires somehow? So, Malia, what I would, I'm going to guess just from the content of that question that you probably didn't watch the council meeting tonight. This was the subject of significant discussion, I would say, and specifically a number of questions of the the assistant chief from TVFNR, and just to summarize, he described conditions that are really concerning and unlike anything that we've been through, and also really described how even sparks that have been put out, or material that had been burning that's been put out, can end up igniting and is way more likely to happen in the current conditions. And I actually described a scenario that he then used to illustrate a point, and that was a couple years ago on July 4th. Some what I would call very responsible members of my local neighborhood had doused fireworks. I wasn't even home when this happened. We were out of town, but they had doused a bunch of legal fireworks, legal in Oregon fireworks, in water, and then put them in a dumpster. And at about 3 a.m., there was a full-on blaze in a large Dropbox style dumpster that had been delivered by Pride Disposal and was full of also some construction debris. And he used that as an example to illustrate how, yeah, okay, all that happened, and then wind conditions, temperature, etc., and this is not this year, this is in a prior year, all of a sudden created the conditions to start a pretty significant fire. So if you think about, and what he described were the risks of very small embers and other things that may be out when you dispose of your fireworks, or may float away but then reignite later. He was describing how that's also like just a small piece of ash from a cigarette can have the same impact and get reignited and cause a spark. So that risk, as he described this year in the suburban and urban environment, in his professional opinion, was far greater than it normally is. So hopefully that helps. Malia, if you want more, you want to see it straight from his mouth, I would encourage you to watch the emergency council meeting that we had at 5:30 p.m. today. See, did I see some questions come in, or some additional parts of questions come in up above there?
This is from Becky.
How is Tigard planning to handle the news from the state in regards to leaving it up to cities and homeowners associations for homeless groups? So we're continuing to operate as we have been. What we've been doing, I think, is compliant with the city, or with the state's requirements. Certainly I think the HOA part of that allows, if I'm recalling correctly, I think the HOAs are not preempted by what was in that legislation. So the city is going to continue doing what it's doing, and we always comply with state law, and we'll continue to do so. So let's see, we got a question. What is the city doing to address affordable housing? Some apartment complexes are kicking out current residents. So I'm not aware of apartment complexes right now that are kicking out residents. What the city's doing to address affordable housing is pretty significant, and I would say robust. Everything from encouraging the development of accessory dwelling units and cottage clusters and other more affordable housing, so things that are less expensive to build and or construct than single-family residential on 7,500 square foot lots. That's one of the things that we're doing. The other things that we're doing are more active in trying to make sure that we get as many affordable housing units built in the city of Tigard, and there's lots of ways that we're doing that. One of the ways we're doing it is by being a good partner and creating areas where it is predictable and relatively inexpensive to plan certain types of housing, and the Tigard Triangle is one of those places. So that's one of the things that we're doing, and then we also provide, in some cases, some subsidies for affordable housing. We've most commonly waived system development charges, which can be significant for affordable housing. in a 50-unit project, that could be more than $1 million. That if the affordable housing contractor or owner is usually a nonprofit, if they have to come up with that extra $1 million, it just makes the project that much harder to do. So we have been supportive of projects like that, and then we had one more creatively recently where we, if they move forward and actually build, we will have the we will forgive a loan that was used to purchase part of the property. So hopefully that's helpful on that topic. Let's see, is the Public Safety Advisory Board meeting? Where are they at in the decision-making process? So, the Public Safety Advisory Board continues to meet every 2 weeks. They are making decisions and they're really making recommendations much of the time on a more continuous basis. And it's not, I would say they're handling various topics at a time. And they've already made recommendations around body cameras, for example, that the council has now considered and funded. And that I think is what I'll share on that. Let's see, we've got another question. Do you happen to know what is happening on Roy Rogers Road and when construction is supposed to be complete? That is a pretty broad question given what's going on Roy Rogers Road. That could be interpreted lots of different ways, but what I will say is if you send us a direct message to the city's Facebook account and describe a little bit more about exactly what part of Roy Rogers Road you're asking about, we can get that to our staff in engineering and development, and they can respond with details. So the staff would be happy to do that. Let's see, Valerie.
She suggests people watch the.
Oh, she's suggesting that people watch the Public Safety Advisory Board videos on YouTube. Valerie, I'll agree with you about that. I think that's a great suggestion. People find those very informative and I think interesting. Really, really interesting group of people and doing very meaningful work. So I agree with that suggestion. What other questions are rolling in? Tigard?
Jim says, thank you, Mayor Snider. Happy to be living in Tigard. There was another question about the ability to sell fireworks in Tigard still, even though there's a ban.
So I think based on the discussion tonight at the council meeting and what we were told we had the authority to do, we did not ban the sale in Tigard, but again, we're trying to figure out how to help perhaps without causing financial harm to those that bought them at wholesale, trying to figure out how to support those organizations and or small businesses to avoid some sort of significant financial burden. So we asked the staff to work on that tonight. And hopefully we'll have some sort of a solution for that. And also, again, a number of ways that people can celebrate the 4th of July safely this year. So, what other questions do we have rolling in, Tigard? Anything more?
This question about with COVID, with Oregon reopened, how that impacts city services.
So we are getting, we're actively working on continuing to reopen services. You're going to probably start to see in-person council meetings in late August or September, and you're starting to see more and more in-person services available at the city. And I anticipate in the next few weeks to month, most everything will be sort of reopened to, for the most part, to pre-COVID levels, if that's helpful. And many of them already are. I guess I should add that.
So Mark says fireworks are just a bad idea. Malia says, got you, thank you, Mayor. DM says, thank you for the response, Mayor. And Malia also says, save the fireworks for New Year's Eve.
Yeah, that'd definitely be a safer time from a weather perspective. In fact, maybe you might have trouble even lighting them on New Year's Eve. But I think that's, given what we're dealing with right now, that would be very wise advice. So I agree, and perhaps by late September, October, perhaps it might be safe as well. But I certainly agree that now is not an advisable time to be lighting off bunch of fireworks or any fireworks.
Mayor Zarish, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, asked, can you talk about the Tigard Gold cohort and if Tigard is planning to continue that type of engagement?
I think we absolutely, so I'll repeat the question just in case people didn't hear it. The question was about the Tigard Gold program, which was a leadership development effort that we committed to as a city to start to build leadership capacity among individuals in our community that are leaders in groups that may not have had as much access or voice in local government in the past. And they, the first cohort just graduated last Saturday, and I know that because their final event was doing mock testimony to me and getting feedback about the effectiveness and approach of their testimony. So that was really interesting and exciting and fun, and I think they all enjoyed it and were learning. I was learning too. I mean, I always learn every time I participate in something or talk with residents of Tigard. I learned something new. So that was a good opportunity. Part of our commitment to be a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community, and you can absolutely expect that to continue. And I think that what I understand from the staff's perspective and the city's perspective is that that was very successful. So I anticipate it will continue.
Mayor, a two-part question here from Paul. One, concerning the density of the new development on Bull Mountain, I would summarize your answer as, sorry, nothing we can do. Is that correct? Secondly, what about the request to require parks? He says I may have missed your answer to this. If you already addressed it, he apologizes.
So I don't know that I would characterize it that way. I mean, many of the questions you had were, or that were posed were about, you know, what happens if there's a problem with X, Y, or Z, and those are all things that are required to be mitigated through through the construction process and planning. And so that is present. The questions about, or the comments about density of construction, et cetera, for the most part are all spelled out and required in Oregon law. So I don't have the authority or the ability to just change Oregon land use law. I'm not even in the legislature. And so I guess I would share that you know, it's not that nothing can be done. I would say that the way Oregon land use law is set up right now, you have to, whatever the criteria are when they apply, or what they get evaluated against. And you know, I guess that's also something that, because it's set in Oregon law, is theoretically changeable, but not by the city. Were there other parts of that?
There's another part, follow-up. Paul, so far, we, residents of Bull Mountain, have had no luck whatsoever in getting any response from the developer/builder. Can you help us with that?
I think we absolutely can. I think staff, if you want to provide your contact information, if we don't already have it, staff can follow up with the planner that will be assigned to that project and have them both hear your concern about contact and questions and try to facilitate getting answers. And certainly the community has an involvement and is an important voice in the development process. So we can absolutely try to help make that happen. Was there another question that was not answered?
No,
there was a question about parks.
Yep.
Okay, so on the question about parks, there are requirements around parks, and the city ultimately or commonly ends up owning parks. Whether there is a park requirement in a development or subdivision of that size, I actually don't know the specific answer to that, but that's something that staff can also get back to you on if you want to provide your contact information. I just don't know what the requirements are for that size of like off the top of my head, but the experts in our community development department can certainly answer that.
Brett, just a comment from Brett. Density is a goal of government at all levels, from the state down. They aren't trying at all to reduce density.
Right. I mean, if you think about what reducing density would mean, especially given the desire of the Portland metropolitan area to sort of focus and avoid urban sprawl. So that's a value that since the 1970s has been part of Oregon land use law, and that's part of the function of the metro regional government is to sort of coordinate the organized development of suburban and urban areas. If you've been to a community that has a lot of urban sprawl, you will see, just housing developments sort of end up just anywhere. You could be out, for example, if this were permitted in Oregon, you could be out in the middle of deep Washington County where there's no urban services or whatever, and just someone that owned a farm sold their land and someone put up 200 houses. We as a state and greater community have decided that that's not how we want development to happen. And what that means is that as you're controlling development in a certain area, the desire is to see more dense development. And more dense development is cheaper to service. For one, it's also generally more affordable. So if you want to see more affordable housing, you want to see more dense housing. It's cheaper to service and cheaper to build the infrastructure for. Any more questions coming in?
Paul just says it seems like the direction is slanted towards the developers/builders.
Well, there's certainly we've got I guess what I will share, I don't know that I can speak authoritatively about whether Oregon land use law favors developers or not. I know it's certainly, there's a set of rules of the game, and the developers certainly try to follow the rules of the game. And so I don't know that favors them per se, but they're certainly experienced. Kelly Ritz, the president of that builder that others asked about earlier, she's been around a while, knows what she's doing, and has been in front of the city of Tigard and many other cities building homes and knows what she's doing. So, and by that I mean she knows how to follow Oregon land use law and the requirements in various jurisdictions. So, I don't know that I call that favoring, but certainly someone who knows what they're doing. Was there a second part of that question?
No, there's another question that came in about the chlorine shortage, and if we're still facing that.
The chlorine shortage is over. The chlorine shortage of 2021 is over. And it's over because two things happened. One, that was really kind of a pretty regional issue, or even a Oregon-Washington issue, caused by one of the large chlorine suppliers for water systems. That they're a large supplier, but their local manufacturing facility had a significant, I think, electrical problem, and they stopped producing chlorine for an extended period of time. But that producer has facilities all over the country, and they were able within a few weeks to figure out how to address the issue there. So that is not an issue we're facing now. We have more than a 30-day supply of what we need, and there is no anticipated continued problem there.
Mayor, next question. Is the City Council capable of declaring a climate emergency resolution to allocate resources to addressing this issue?
The City Council certainly can, and actually we have set it as a council goal for the next 2-year cycle to get really to develop a bold community resiliency plan, which includes climate, and that is work that is starting in earnest now. I would say the city, from my perspective, has been a little bit behind where some other communities are on that, but ahead of others. So Beaverton and Milwaukee both have been, I think, out ahead on that work, and then there are other communities that are maybe not even talking about it. So we're somewhere in the middle, and when I became mayor, that was something I absolutely wanted to see move forward more robustly, and we have committed that in our current council goals, and you're going to see a lot more action on that in the coming months to years.
Next question is from Rick. What is the best way to encourage Kelly Ritz, president of Stone Build Bridge Homes, to add a park to their development plan?
Well, I think the first thing to do, again to the point I was making earlier, would probably be to find out from the city community development staff whether that's a requirement and under what conditions. Because what developers tend to and home builders respond to are the criteria and the requirements. So that would be where I'd suggest you start your homework, is to get the answers to those questions and then figure out how that may work. The other thing would be to talk about with the home builder about whether that from your perspective is an amenity that might help them sell homes. Either sell them or sell them for more than they would without the park. Those are probably the factors that are going to matter the most to a builder, and so I think it just makes sense to try to approach that. And there may be a tact or an approach I'm not thinking about, but those are the things that sort of come immediately to mind.
Diane asked, did we talk about fireworks yet?
Oh, Diane, welcome to the conversation, and we have talked about it twice, but I can do it again. This evening, the City of Tigard City Council, or a subset of the City Council, because some were not available for the emergency meeting, have made a decision to ban all fireworks through July 9th and to dramatically increase the fines and clarified the what it would apply to for the use of illegal fireworks, and increased that fine to $1,000 per item that is confiscated or used. So that was, I think, at $150 per incident now. It's going to be $1,000 per item. The hope is that we will see no use of illegal fireworks. And frankly, we don't want to see the use of any fireworks, which is why we enacted the ban. The ban on larger illegal fireworks is through September. The other is currently through July 9th, and that was what the council could agree to. Some members of the council wanted it to be, the ban on all fireworks to be longer. Another council member that came into the meeting this evening wasn't really feeling supportive of banning fireworks at all, so that was sort of a compromise position that we ended up on.
Right, we've had a couple questions about enforcement of the fireworks ban.
Oh.
And
Okay.
basically getting at, how, I think this stems from Portland's acknowledgement that they may not be able to enforce their ban, and how Tigard would be different.
Well, I would say Portland actually said, don't call us, because we're not going to, which is not what we're saying. That's not really our style as a city. What is obvious, and I think true, and if you want to see details about this in our council discussion, we asked a number of questions of the police chief this evening in our council meeting, and I would encourage you to look at that. But the practical reality with the number of officers that the Tigard Police Department has is that the focus is always going to be on major threats to life and safety, and managing those as they're happening. Even though there will be fireworks being used on July 4th, there tends to be a lot of drinking and other things that happen which lead to fights and DUIs and other things that happen and have to be responded to. Last year, she was sharing data. I think we got 48 calls for fireworks on the 4th of July in our community, and I think she indicated that the staffing, and this is with additional staff being called in, there will be 3 officers that will be responding primarily to fireworks calls for the period where it's quite busy between 9 and 11 p.m. or so on the 4th of July. And 48 calls may not seem like a lot, but one of the points she emphasized as well is that those calls all come in within a couple-hour period. So if it were 48 calls spread out over 24 hours, that'd be one thing. But that is not how it happens. So trying to respond to 48 calls that happen in 2 hours is a very different problem. And so the reality is that enforcement is, I would say the most likely way to get caught and have an enforcement action taken is by having a problem at whatever event you're doing, and whether that's a fire or complaints in a fight or just a fireworks call that the police department ends up being able to make it to. If you're using illegal fireworks this year in Tigard, I anticipate that the police department is going to take the city council's lead and direction on that pretty seriously and probably do everything they can to try to focus on that. The practical reality is we're not going to be able to enforce the complete ban of fireworks use in the city of Tigard to prevent any of them from being used. That's just not practical. And if you want to watch more detail about that, you can watch tonight's council meeting. What else do we have?
Mr. Mayor, how will you be spending your 4th of July?
How will I be spending the 4th of July? Who's that question coming from? Gotta know.
Kent W.
Kent W. Over actually just about a year ago, when COVID was sort of really starting to set in, you can think about what July of last year was like. My wife and I, we'd already recognized that, COVID was going to have a continued impact on us and our family and our ability to really travel safely. And so last July, I think it was in July actually, it might have been early August of last year, we actually booked a house on the Willamette River in Wilsonville, so kind of a staycation that was, I would say, nicer and more expensive than we would normally do, but we felt like we weren't going to be going anywhere. We weren't going to be traveling, and we wanted to have an opportunity to have and make some great family memories close by. So that's where I'm going to be, and because we have a lot of vaccinated people in my family now, we are going to be able to have a couple of other more elderly family members who we've not gotten to see for a long time join us on that.
All caught up on the questions.
All caught up. Tigard, you got any further questions? Now's the time. In the first poolside chat we've had, and I'll just let everyone know I'm actually wearing shorts. I'm in theme here for you tonight in the poolside chat. No, I'm not going to show them to you if you ask that question, but the staff can verify it. Any further questions coming in?
Nope, a lot of thumbs up through you wearing shorts, so I don't know what that means. I'll reserve comment.
Oh boy, yeah, I don't know what that means either. All right, Tigard, you got about 20 more seconds. Pop your last questions in the chat. Otherwise, good night and have a safe and happy 4th of July. Any final questions?
Last question.
Oh, we got one.
Sliders or slippers? I did not ask this question.
Sliders or slippers? Oh, like what am I wearing right now?
Yes.
I'd put them more in the slipper category. I am wearing Crocs that are they're not like the real Crocs, but they're like the Crocs with canvas.
Mary Ann Anderson says, thank you, Mayor. Rick says, thank you for doing this chat.
Okay, thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with the community in these, so thank you very much. Any final questions, Ken?
Nope.
All right, good night, Tigard. Thank you.